This is a game that I played against jlaramie in the third round of Racoon Cup number 90 on BoardGameArena. This is the furthest I've made it in one of these tournaments. Fairly new player and had been getting smashed. I managed to get through another top player, Attack Andy, in the second round due to an admitted misclick with a Herald, and I managed to get past jlaramie here. I'd like to review this game because while the ending is a little anticlimactic, it's also a little cool. So for the drafting portion, I banned Merc here, expecting him to ban Bannerman, and that I'd snag Herald. I like Herald a little more than Cavalry, but that's just preference on my part. Cavalry is probably a little better in a vacuum. So jlaramie takes Cavalry and Royal Guard, leaving me to choose from among Crossbow, Swordsman, and Knight. I'd take Swordsman here in retrospect, as I've grown to respect it more than Knight. My opponent has a lineup without much extra movement, and I expect him to develop Cavalry early, probably bolster off the Ensign, and move Royal Guard to a defensive central point. Swordsman is the secondary unit, and is likely going to be active on the side Cavalry isn't on. With this opener, I plan to develop Herald, and snag the 5 closest points with it and the crossbowman. I recruit the crossbow first because I'm concerned that swordsman will dominate the side of the board it's on if I don't develop my crossbow. I choose to develop the Lancer over Knight here, because Lancer will threaten a potentially critical point later on. I'm likely to bolster either one off, but a bolstered Knight in the back row will take too many moves to become relevant when needed. The plan is still to focus on Crossbow and Herald, taking the 3 closest unclaimed points, and looking for an opportunity to flip a point later. I bolster Lancer off here, so my bag is focused on that plan, and I'll be doing the same with Knight. Knight is now 2 moves from 2 control points, instead of 1 control point if I had placed it on the right side earlier. I bolster Herald instead of moving on to a point, because a double Cavalry hand would be potentially game-ending here. OP, which I'll use as a shorthand for opponent, uses Ensign to move Swordsman, which I hadn't considered. It makes me wish I had bolstered instead of controlling in the previous bag. I didn't want to risk an initiative take followed by Swordsman killing Crossbow. It's a 50% shot, but would be crippling if OP pulled it off. If Swordsman moves on to the point, I have nothing to threaten it with, and OP can just flip a few easy points for victory. While I end up using the Sacrifice Decree to trade units and control the point, I just noticed another line of play. Could use the Royal Coin to march, and then trigger Herald to move it onto the unclaimed point behind Swordsman, which does leave my left side open, but lets me dominate the right. It still leaves me at 5 points though, with an unclear path to 6, but worth considering. Here, OP starts their bag with a Royal Guard, and has 2 draws at 2 Cavalry out of a 5 bag, which means they get 0 Cavalry 30% of the time, 1 Cavalry 60% of the time, and 2 Cavalry 10% of the time. I had to go back and run these numbers. I just estimated it at the time. My options here are I could bolster the Herald and likely soak the 1 Cavalry hit. Number 2, I could kill a Cavalry and deploy the crossbow in that spot after my Herald is killed. Or 3, I could spy and take a Cavalry if OP has 1 or 2 of them in hand. The worst case scenario is there's 1 Cavalry and then OP draws another one, but only 30% of the time. Either way, I kill a Cavalry and replace my dead Herald with the crossbow. I go the spy route and get massively paid off. Another Cavalry isn't drawn, and I finish wiping out the Cavalry stack with Herald. My bag is looking a bit too light, so I recruit a Lancer. Remember the move I forecast earlier? I'm trying to set up for that. My 5th point will be on the far left, so I need one of the 2 points on the right to win. The Royal Guard will move on to the other point and will be impossible to dislodge. I recruit a crossbow here to activate my otherwise inactive crossbowman on the board, knowing that I'm likely to kill the cavalry unless OP takes initiative, which he does. I get lucky though, and cavalry is the single coin left in OP's bag. I march cavalry up, and OP falls victim to playing a turn-based game distractedly. Based on a conversation I had after, he didn't notice that March moved the Lancer and not a coin. This let me warp to the unclaimed point, attacking the ensign, and seals the game for me. The proper play from OP is probably ensign moving cavalry in front of the Lancer, blocking its move, and I think the game is fairly interesting from there. As I said, it's a bit of an anticlimactic ending, given that it was just a mistake that caused it, but I do think some earlier plays in the game were interesting enough that I wanted to do a narration of this. Thanks for listening.